What's going on, guys? Ahmed back with another video. Today, I'm going to be going over and reviewing this new project by J.I. the Prince, a rapper, singer, songwriter, and his new project, Young and Restless. I think it's called Baby, yeah, Baby Dawn Volume 1. So going into this record, I didn't have any insane expectations. I think J.I. the Prince of New York is kind of a um, very much a part of the melodic strand of New York rap, uh, who very similar to Tekka, Boogie, and TJ, who does his best to kind of use these crooning auto-tune vocals to get more of a deeper message across about his life, his love life, and his personal life. But with the image that A Boogie has helped to pioneer, that sort of smart, that street smart, sort of sensitive person. He definitely is going to have some tracks where he's talking about his gang affiliations. And so I know a little bit. I listened to Jay the Prince a little bit for the upcoming record. I definitely listened to his singles, which I was a big fan of, particularly No Hook and Toxic. And so, like I said, wasn't didn't have too high of expectations for this album, and honestly, I was unfortunately a bit disappointed. The record wasn't bad. I definitely, and you all are gonna see in my ratings that I have it as mid, but I think that one of the problems I see with a lot of new age rap is that there's so many subgenres now that once you're in a subgenre, oftentimes you don't feel the need to deviate from, like, you don't feel the need to set yourself apart in that subgenre, right? Like if you think about back in the day, there was like it was like just gangster rap. That was the only subgenre, right? And then there was like just melodic rap, and that was the only subgenre. Um, and or I guess romantic rap really was a subgenre. We hadn't even back in the day. It was really Lauryn Hill and Outkast who started like melodic rap specifically. But back in the day, it was just LL Cool J and Lauryn Hill with romantic rap. Um, and so or lyrical rap. That was the only sub. That was the extent of the subgenre. And nowadays, even in just the melodic rap space, we have gospel rap, romantic rap. Of course, we still have that. We have sort of this New York strand of street smart romantic rap. We have SoundCloud rap. That's another kind of romantic. We have mental health rap. Sort of everything is so much more stratified, but as a result, inside each lane, the artists don't do as much to separate themselves. And I feel like that's my biggest issue with this record. Um, and while like I said, I don't consider it a bad record. I think there are, I would say, three main things that are holding it back. Let's pull up the track list here. But before we get into any of that, I do want to get into what I think was good about the record. So first of all, y'all are going to see this. Hopefully, if A Boogie really kills it with what he was dropped with A Boogie verse artist. But I am very much a fan of the use of stripped back instrumentals to really get your point across. I love how back in the day, A Boogie would use these guitars or these pianos, these solo instruments to really get his point across. And even nowadays, the way that he will use very minimalist instrumentals to get his point across is genuinely impressive. And J.I. the Prince does that very well. I felt like the production, while very, very repetitive, definitely worked for his style of music. Also, some of the more hardcore rapping tracks on the album, such as No Hook, such as Stronger, such as Murda, um, were honestly pretty good. Um, and while we're going to get into his vocals, I think that writing wise, his deeper songs were very strong. I felt like songs like Relapse, songs like Toxic, especially songs like Right Away and Love Letter, I felt like the writing on those tracks, he really took time to, and learned how to express himself properly. And I think that, a lot of times I think, especially with drill artists, um, and New York artists in general, they can sort of lose themselves in the sauce and lose focus a lot of the time. But I felt like he stayed focused per track, knew what he was doing, knew what he wanted to accomplish per track, and I felt like that was honestly one of the stronger parts of the record. Unfortunately, that's kind of where the good parts of the record stop. Um, and where the problems begin. The first problem being the vocals. Now, I don't have the highest standard for vocals, of course, but some of the vocals on this were straight up bad. Um, some of them were passable, like on Toxic. Some of them were passable, but the auto tune is so heavy that it the deepness that he's trying to accomplish doesn't even really fully come through because it feels so autonomized. It feels so like manufactured. And when I say manufactured, draw that to like a Rod Wave or a Drake, where you can feel vocally how the softness of their vocals and the pureness of their vocals really helps get their point across in terms of messaging. And I just didn't really get that with this album. I felt like J.I. the Prince really kind of relied very heavily on autotune. And unlike other people like Travis Scott, Young Thug, Future, he didn't really, or T-Pain, he didn't really use the autotune in a creative way. He just kind of used it as like heavy vocal correction. But like I said, at that point, it sounds so automated and so computerized that the passion that he's trying to give off doesn't even really come across in a lot of the records. And so that was problem number one. Problem number two, I would say, was and again, and I talk about this with Don Q as well, but I feel like he has not done enough to really separate himself. And I feel like, unfortunately, J.I. the Prince of New York is kind of a good name in the sense that he is on the outside looking in, and can't really separate himself and can't really separate himself from the Tekkas, the Lil TJs, and the A Boogies. And so that was definitely kind of a struggle. Like, for example, songs like No Hook, song like Murder, I enjoy them, sure, but to me, it's just a TJ drill track, that's not with worse vocals to me, right? And so I would say, while on its own, you could maybe call this project good or decent, in the zeitgeist of all of New York music, and when you put into the context that there are people like Tekka and TJ and Boogie who do this sound better, it kind of diminishes the impact of this record, unfortunately, for me. And yeah, like I said, going through the track list, the the writing was great, but it was so like I said, it was so autonomized. It was so like such heavy vocal correction that I couldn't even really fully get into it. And unlike, say, a Tekka, who is at the very least able to separate himself with more nerdy bars, and things and a more interesting flow, I don't feel like J.I. the Prince really does that, right? I think the number one thing that he could do to improve himself. Oh, and I will say that as a result, it makes it so that, and I see what he's doing, right? Because as a result, what happens is that he has to really up the ante on the production side, because to make up for the poor vocal performance on songs like I think Murder and Toxic. you can hear these sort of elements of Afro beats and guitars and all these other things, but that I feel that that's only there to kind of distract from the lackluster vocal performances that I feel like he's giving. And I feel like rather than taking so much time to sort of come up with these different melodies and these different, rather than coming up with these different instrumentals and these different flows and stuff like that, which are still generic for the most part, I feel that the best thing that J.I. the Prince can do, if he really wants to be the Prince of New York, right, the second best, and high and gain a high level of respect, he's got to up his vocals, right? Because the hard truth is that in the zeitgeist of all hip hop, A Boogie, especially old A Boogie, was like passable vocally, right? He was passable vocally. He wasn't even very much, and even still, I wouldn't consider him outstanding vocally, even in the context of just rap. I would consider his vocals good. And so when you have these people who are not even reaching the standard of A Boogie vocals, there's not much of it's a lot harder for them to really break in and have a big splash. You saw with TJ, he was kind of able to break in because he was able to get closer to Boogie vocally. And Tekka, to a lesser extent, was kind of able to break in, although I still that he could be doing better vocally. But I do wish that these artists who love A Boogie and appreciate A Boogie and follow in his footsteps would very much keep that in mind, that in the zeitgeist of all hip hop, even now, A Boogie's vocals are just good, right? They're not great, they're not amazing, they're not perfect, they're just good. And I would say, in comparison to people like the greats of melodic rap, 3000, Drake, and Lauryn Hill, and even Nelly, maybe, I would say that, A Boogie's vocals are not, ultra out of the ordinary. But also, I think what people don't understand is that A Boogie makes up for it with incredible flows, incredibly fast flows, that are very impressive, and sort of make up for his lack of vocal range or vocal ability. But I feel like these people are not able to do it. One of the other things I wanted to talk about was the lack of execution sometimes. Like, for example, on songs like Love Letter, songs like Taken for Granted or Right Away, I feel like he is really trying to make appeal to the pop world, appeal to the R&B world with these slower tracks. But when you do that, you have to level up your vocals matter even more, right? Take for example, one of the reasons I'm so excited about this A Boogie album is because he has taken a very big step up, right? When you look at a track like Bleed, his vocals aren't crazy, but that's okay because he's rapping fast, he's going quick, he's got punchline, punchline, punchline. But then when you look at a song like Be Free, notice how A Boogie is taking more time to push his vocals to make sure that they're as good as possible. You see the same thing with, Rest in Peace to Juice World. You see the same thing to a certain extent with TJ on Calling My Phone. When they do these slower, almost R&B tracks, they work harder to make sure that their vocals are as good as possible. And one of the problems here is that I don't really see that, right? And so listening to this album, it was almost a bit frustrating for me because on one hand, this guy has so much potential because writing wise, he can do it, right? Writing wise, he can do it. And while I wish he would sort of work to dive into his own story a little bit, he definitely, I think, is a stronger writer than Tekka, for example. And he's very well able to execute his feelings and emotions in ways that are compelling lyrically. But until he improves his vocals, it's really gonna fall flat, you know. Um, and so yeah, that's kind of how I overall feel about the record. Um, yeah, so let's get into let's get into the rating here. Let's get into the rating. All right, stop sharing. All right, let's widen it a little bit. So let's talk about my rating here. So for Young and Reckless, like I said, I give it a good on the writing scale. I felt like everything was well executed, and he was able to focus track by track. No crazy punchlines or deep concepts that I felt like warrant the great or the amazing rating. And again, I feel like in comparison to somebody like a TJ, especially I think it's True to Myself project by TJ. Um, I felt like he could have gone more specific into his own story, similar to how maybe you have a TJ, I found my gift for music back before the age of 8. Back when I was 5, I knew that I was going to be great when we switched the bars, but you know what I mean. Um, but definitely good writing. Again, not great, but good writing. Flows and vocals, like I said, I gotta put it as bad because I feel like flow wise he's okay, I guess, although of course still very derivative of other artists and other styles. Um and vocally he shows hints of something really really strong, such as on, like I said, Toxic, such as on Murder, but overall it just doesn't land. And he's so computerized and there's so much heavy auto tune that the deep message, it almost undercuts the writing because the automation is so heavy that we can't even really feel it. That is the vocals, production, and creativity. So this was kind of a weird thing where I put them together because sort of and I guess I can go into why I put stuff together. So for example, writing is just one thing, but flows slash vocals I kind of view like as an artist's overall performance. So like besides the writing, the things that encompass what make a rapper good, um, besides just the writing. So sometimes if they're not singing or doing anything, it'll just be flow. But for this, it'll be vocals and flow because vocals were a big part of this record. And for production and creativity, these are kind of things that are outside of just what the artist is saying and doing, and more like the surrounding aspects of the record, I sort of seen it as. And so production was good, but creativity was bad, right? I talked to you all about how he hasn't done much to separate himself from the pact. And like I said, my standards are not super high when it comes to creativity. I feel like I said, I consider Tekka to have a decent amount of creativity just for the fact that he brings more nerdy bars, maybe about school, or his love life and sort of struggling in that sense, or even with, and I may review it at some point, but with Lotto's album, I simply gave her a good rating on creativity simply for bringing Southern accent to a trap beat. So my standards are not super high with creativity, but when I can clearly hear, you know, not only where your influence are, but how you haven't truly pushed past your influences or done anything different than your influences, that's a problem. And I think when I can, I try not to say this a lot, but when I feel like your influences could do your thing better, that's a big problem for me. Production was pretty good. Like I said, it kind of, I could tell that he was doing a lot with the production in order to kind of make up for the lack of vocals to keep the songs entertaining. And musical execution, it was cool. There's a couple songs I'm gonna take on here. Nothing super catchy. Nothing I feel like was like crazy over the top. But there was definitely like Toxic, Murder, Stronger. Definitely a few songs. Let me see. Yeah, Stronger. Oh, No Hook as well. No Hook I really enjoyed. But there was, of course, a few songs on here that really sounded not that great, and did not were not all that compelling for me, such as Love Letter, such as Riot. And so, yeah, that's kind of it. It gets the mid rating. Like I said, not super bad, but not nothing crazy outstanding either. And that gives us kind of an overall rating of a mid. Like I said, not a, I wouldn't classify this as a bad record. Definitely a bit, I think, a bit disappointing, because writing wise, I feel like J.I. the Prince is strong, and I can tell that he, just by the name Prince of New York, I can tell that he's competitive, and he wants that he wants to be in that top 10. He wants to be in that top spot. He wants to sort of jump over these other guys, but he's still kind of got a decent ways to go. So let me just give my final thoughts. So yeah, final thoughts. Like I said, throughout, still a bit disappointed. Wish he would have done a little bit better. I think if he takes more time to really work on his vocals, and whether it be vocal coaching, whether it be linking up with R&B artists or whatever it is, I think that if he takes the time to really work on his vocals so that he does not need as much auto-tune in the future, immediately this will probably, like, this album would probably move up to a great rating. And yeah, that's kind of my overall thoughts on it. Thank you all for watching. And yeah, oh, I forgot. I apologize. Last video I said let me know in the comments. Still don't have my comments turned on, so we're gonna see eventually. Hopefully, I get my comments turned on and I can get some comments on these videos. But yeah, definitely give the record a spin, and maybe you all like it, maybe you all don't, and that's okay. We all have our own opinions. Have a good day, y'all.